Alright, I'm going to try this and see how it goes. It is my Friday. Trying out the new microphone. It's not technically new in terms of purchase, but it's new in terms of getting used to it and using it. So I have a silicone wedding ring that, if you didn't know any better, looks like that. And close in the dark. Glow in the dark. For those of you unaware, I unabashedly love things that glow in the dark with the joy of my inner 12-year-old self. So, trying this producer Ramble thing a little differently. That way the video isn't cutting out left, right, and center for y'all. And hopefully the audio and video quality both is better. What the shenanigans is going on here? There's a giant dump truck in the way. You would think that for a facility that's been in place since 1954, they would have more than a one-lane road with steel plates on it when there's 600 people a day who work there. Wow, that man has incredibly red hair. Okay. And no soul. And that is a bottle of maple syrup on top of a broken down car. I can't even. Okay. So, I had an interesting conversation with one of our players. Not during Week of Tales, but the week after Week of Tales. Actually, the Monday after Week of Tales. And I've been thinking about it a lot. The player came to me in a very respectful way, which I appreciate, in a very kind of corporate, professional way. Not normally the way I choose to engage and interact with our player base and our community, but in this case, they were having some very strong feelings and wanted to have a conversation about it in a very kind of like productive, don't want feelings to get in the way, want to ask some questions kind of thing. And what it turned out to be in regards to was something that was a very intense concern on their part. There we go. That's better. Clean windshield. Yay! Very intense concern on their part. Specifically, that the plot staff who were responsible for running the mods that their character was participating in were changing monster stats and abilities and spawns and changing monster stuff on the fly while the mod was running. Basically modifying the brief that the NPCs got at the beginning of the mod, and as the mod went forward, and the player who came to me felt that this wasn't fair, that it was effectively cheating on the part of staff members who were running things. And they had some really strong feelings about it. And it's fine. It's totally fine. And I really appreciate the way that they came to me and wanted to have a conversation about it instead of me just getting a wall of text at 3 o'clock in the morning as to why we're screwing everything up. Because that happens, unfortunately. And I'm usually the one who takes the brunt of it. And what happened, and the reason that I'm doing a producer ramble about this, is that this player and myself had a conversation instead of an argument, which was great. And what we came to realize is that I was very tired. But other than that, was that we each were coming at the experience of being in a fight, being in a LARP fight as a player is it requires expectations in regard to why you as a player are participating in that moment of content. Similarly, it's good for us as leadership and team members to be clear with what our set of expectations are in terms of the what, why, and how of us putting content on the field in regards to the players. Which is a long way, which is a whole lot of saying, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we as plot staff are doing when we're putting content on the field, and what we are not doing, and relating that hopefully to some tabletop RPG Dungeons and Dragons terms, so that you guys may be more familiar with that. I am going to be using Dungeons and Dragons terms just because it's kind of a lingua franca for nerds and RPG players of all kinds. After the whole Pinkerton fiasco, I really want nothing to do with Wizards of the Coast, and if there was another super easy, common RPG language to use, I would be using it right now, but I really want to get this message out, rather than try and translate everything into terms that folks might not / won't get the full message of. So that's why I'm using Dungeons and Dragons terms, even though I would really prefer not to right now. Or really ever again. So the plot team who are writing a mod are not always the ones who end up running it, for a million different reasons, but especially when the game population was larger, and especially when the leadership team was much, much larger, it was not uncommon for one plot team member to take the brief that somebody else had written and go set up and run mods or adventures or encounters or whatever you want to call them for players, putting content on the field. That's what I'm referring to. Basically, anything that we put in front of you guys that isn't you sitting in camp doing absolutely nothing is in some way, shape, or form referenceable as an encounter. Whether that be merchant, or even an info card, even a single info card given to a player could be considered an encounter. But that's not really here nor there. This is why it's called a producer ramble. So I'm going to reference fights specifically because that's what the player came to me with the conversation about. In a Dungeons & Dragons game, the DM has a group of characters that she, I'm just going to use female pronouns for the DM through here because I am super, super proud and love our community member, Trisha Reitmeyer, an intense amount. And whenever somebody talks about DMing now, she's kind of what pops into my head. If you don't know who she is, you are absolutely missing out. So, when a DM writes their own encounter, not talking about using pre-published materials, they are taking a specific bundle of math and giving that to the players in the terms of an encounter, in the context of an encounter, and putting them up against it. And the DM knows what the variables for that encounter are. The DM knows the monster stats, the DM knows the terrain, the DM knows whatever traps and encounters and all kinds of stuff that may be adding into the complexity of the encounter. The DM knows the spells that the bad guys may have, and all of that stuff is on her side of the screen. And if the players are in a traditional RPG setup, the players don't see any of that. And most importantly for the context of this situation that we're talking about relating to our LARP, the DM also knows, with a very high percentage of certainty, the abilities and stats, and specifically math, of the characters that she is going to be fielding content for. Note that I didn't say against there. And the DM in a traditional tabletop RPG is usually only dealing with a handful of characters. I mean, large tables get large, we all know this, but that's still a maximum typically of like 7 to 8 sets of character stats. Some of you can already see where I'm going here. And those stats are almost always within a certain percentage of each other. Now, if we reflect that to the situation that we deal with as plot team for a LARP, the only pieces of that hold true, the only pieces of that hold true is the stuff about the monsters and the environment. We know all that stuff because we have created it together, and we know the language that we're speaking in because the core rules document has all of our tools and capabilities already in it. But it's never going to be the same mix of characters. it's never going to be the same power level of characters. It's never going to be the characters with the same abilities, because our makers can create stuff for those heroes who are going on a particular adventure or piece of content. So all of the player variables will always be different every single time they interact with the content that we have created. There is no constancy for us. There is no set variables, or there is no set data package for all of that. All we have the ability to do is create the monster side of things, or the NPC side of things. And because of that, the mindset that we go into for a particular set of encounters is very specific. We don't create content for what challenge rating, I air quotes here, we want. We don't create the encounters based on the math. Most of the time, we're creating content based on the emotion that we want to evoke in a particular piece of content. Do we want a life and death struggle? Do we want a fun romp? Do we want comedy? Do we want informational? Do we want etc., etc.? What feeling, what emotion do we want to evoke with a particular piece of content? Explicitly, and here's where the disconnect came between what the player thought they were getting into versus what we actually do. The player thought that going into an encounter in Britannis was similar enough to a standard Dungeons and Dragons set of expectations that the resource expenditure and the threat level and the experience was going to be pretty similar to a tabletop RPG character. And that's just not the case, because the truth is that every single player as their character has an entirely different experience of every single mod, every single piece of content that we put on screen, because everyone is coming at it from an entirely different set of variables on their own part, all the way from their own personal experience and level of comfort with the rules, whether that be the crafting rules or the combat rules or the scholar and information rules, etc., etc., etc. Also, way more than a tabletop RPG, how much sleep you got is a huge variable. How much food you've eaten, what kind of food you've eaten, whether you're hydrated or not, whether you're sunburned or not, whether you're on your 6th trip through the challenge gate today, or your first. All of those things have huge impact on how an individual player experiences the content that we put forth. And because of that, we as plot team members, when we are running content for players, have to be hyper aware and hyper observant of the vibe, for lack of a better term, that we are getting from the players in a particular moment. And if the vibe is going way off track. We have tools and abilities, we have tools in our plot team toolboxes that we can use to alter, to change, to massage, to nudge, to zhuzh, as my beloved wife would say, the experience of a particular piece of content to be closer to the emotion and the experience that we want to provide. I am so excited, so excited to be able to run night content again, to be able to run encounters after dark once it gets truly black out in the woods, and to be able to set the mood and use special effects that are just useless during the day to help change and modify the encounter experience that we're able to put on screen for you guys. So I'm sitting in my driveway now, and I've talked a lot about what we do want to do and what we do want to portray and how we do run content. And I will end with the opposite of that and talk briefly about what we aren't doing. Britannis is always and will always be story focused first. Otherwise, it's just stick jocks beating on each other with foam pool noodles, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. Amtgard, Daggerheer, Belagarth, Hema, all the way up to the MMA and plate mail guys and gals and they thems are completely valid, and they're doing something entirely different than what we are doing. We are working on telling a collective story that is moving roughly in the same Arthur-shaped direction together. What we are not doing is combat simulation. What we are not doing is a sport. Although it has many sport-like aspects, what we are not doing is a perfectly balanced skirmish combat game where whenever you face off, you can be confident that the rules support a balanced combat experience. Whether that be on the war table or face-to-face with an NPC swinging a foam axe at your nugget. Not at your nugget, because that's not a legal target. At your shoulder. To be clear, a player having an expectation that every fight they get into is going to be balanced to their own individual physical combat abilities as well as their own rules capability is just impossible. It's just not possible, because in addition to all of the other variables that I've talked about so far in the last 24 minutes, we only get one shot at everything we run. There is no rehearsal. There is no, let's do this and then let's try it again and see if we can get it right the second time. There is no, well, the encounter was way deadlier this time than we intended it to be, so the next time we run it, we'll change things by 15%, blah, blah, blah. No, there isn't any of that, because the data is never the same twice. there's never the same number of players, there's never the same power level of players, there's never the same level of rules expertise on the NPC side, so you never get the same experience from the NPC teams either twice. And I, very early on in running Britannis, decided that if we didn't frame that reality, so that reality isn't going to change. We're never going to run the exact same thing with the exact same stats, with the exact same players, in the exact same mindset twice. It's just never going to happen. Even if we do it exactly back to back, it will be slightly different every single time. And we know that because we actually did try to run a mod experience that was the exact same thing 3 times, and there were 3 wildly different outcomes because the players and the NPCs made wildly different choices each time it ran. So very early on, I had to decide that reality is a feature, not a bug. And settling on that reality means settling on that framing of the reality means that we as plot team members get to approach every piece of content we put out in front of you guys and gals and they thems and people on every piece of the gender spectrum. We get to treat those as paragraphs in a story, as opposed to army list write-ups for a tabletop skirmish game. And that means we can provide vastly different experiences based on what we are trying to evoke in the players, as opposed to getting the numerical balance right, because there is no such thing in our hobby, or in this version of our hobby. I hope that clears that stuff up. Feel free to comment, and we can have as much of a discussion as social media allows about those kind of things. And I hope this producer Ramble was able to provide some information. I appreciate every single one of you. You are wonderful, and I love you dearly. Thank you for being part of our community, and I'll see you next time.